Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where Kick-Ass 2 was making the wrong kind of headlines thanks to Jim Carrey. Yesterday afternoon, the actor inexplicably tweeted that he no longer supports the film because he feels it's too violent. And he says he made it before the tragic Sandy Hook Elementary shooting, and now, post that tragic event, he can no longer support a film that he feels is overly violent. What a damning tweet. In 120 characters or less, he has sent the PR team for Kick-Ass 2 reeling, I'm sure. And they are on damage control fast because Mark Miller, who wrote Kick-Ass, and he's written Kick-Ass 2, and he's currently writing Kick-Ass 3, and he's behind these movies, immediately took to the internet and said, I don't know what Jim Carrey's talking about. He knew what he signed on for, and we are not being irresponsibly violent. We are showing the consequences of these kind of actions realistically. And we are actually much better than the other Hollywood films that aren't violent because we don't lie about it. We show the truth. So, I mean, in a moment I'll talk about whether or not I think Kick-Ass 2 is too violent. But off the bat, this is the last kind of publicity that Kick-Ass 2 needed, because as we all know, the first Kick-Ass suffered a lot from people saying it was overly violent and vulgar. And so to be able to come back and make a sequel has been kind of like redemption for this franchise, and to become a franchise, and to kind of like fight back against a stigmatism that it's really been suffering with. And enough time passed and it was enough of a cult hit that I think it moved beyond that and kind of owned it. But to have its own star, who was supposed to be part of that stamp of approval, now turn around and say, I'm disgusted by what I've made, is going to bring that back to being the forefront of the conversation for Kick-Ass 2, and I think sway a lot of people from going to the film, especially mainstream moviegoers who might have been on the fence to begin with. But that said, Jim Carrey, as Mark Miller said, knew what he was getting into, and there have been really tragic events before Sandy Hook. I mean, guns are a major problem in this country. So I don't understand quite why Jim Carrey would change his mind now. Why is he tweeting now, especially when the film doesn't open for about a month? My guess actually would be that the studio is trying to line him up for a Comic-Con appearance, and he's feeling a lot of PR pressure and he doesn't want to do it. And maybe he's making sure they don't ask him, because this is apparently now what he's going to say and will certainly be asked about throughout the convention if he does show up. So that this might be kind of like a proactive or defensive move on his part. Kick-Ass 2. I've read Kick-Ass 2. When I read it, I really did feel personally that it went a little bit too far. I think it is realistic, but then, at the same time, I don't know if you can make a commercially successful film that goes into detail, for instance, about the Charles Manson murders. These are really appalling, horrible events that sadly do happen, but is that entertainment? Is that something that should be explored? Kick-Ass 2 is, if you thought Kick-Ass 1 was rough, I mean, Kick-Ass 2 really tests the ideas in being in good taste and responsibility. And I think it's debatable whether or not it crosses that line. But, again, everybody knew this going in, and I kind of feel that for Jim Carrey to torpedo a project he's involved in and a lot of other people's careers are involved in is not cool. So, I mean, it's a very interesting situation. Jim Carrey doesn't need another one of these I don't make any sense, I'm crazy and committing career suicide moments. This was supposed to be kind of like also a comeback for him. So it's just a crazy scenario expected to develop further, and maybe, or maybe not. Maybe the studio will just go silent on this and hope the story goes away. The question is, will Jim Carrey remain silent on it? Okay, so speaking of Kick-Ass 2 and its star Aaron Taylor Johnson, his wife, director Sam Taylor Johnson, who they met on the set of Nowhere Boy, she has been hired to direct 50 Shades of Grey. They got their director. Interestingly, it's a woman. I think that's shades of Twilight there when they had Catherine Hardwicke start the franchise. And Sam Taylor Johnson is no stranger to sexy scandal, because when she hooked up with Aaron Taylor, back when he was Aaron Taylor, or Aaron Johnson, I forget their names, they're mixed up, but when they were back on Nowhere Boy, there is a 23-year age difference between the two of them. So she's had her own fantasies and been the source of a lot of tabloid gossip, but they're now married very happily, and so now she's getting a huge break directing this film. I think it's interesting to choose her. I think, as I said, it's the Twilight route. She's only directed one feature film. It did not get a lot of attention critically or box office wise. So I think that I personally would have gone with Gus Van Sant, who I know really wanted it. I think that would have made it a choice that maybe more adults would have been comfortable going to. But I think that choosing Sam Taylor Johnson sends it more of this like tweeny, kind of like sudsy route, which I don't know about. And also, you have to wonder, does this mean that Aaron Taylor Johnson will have a role in the film? Savages, he made that Oliver Stone film. He's certainly not against doing sexy roles on screen. So I would think that, don't be surprised I don't know if he'll get Christian Grey. That might be too much nepotism or favoritism. I don't know if a husband counts as nepotism, but I expect him to see him somewhere in the film. Again, interesting choice, not a great choice in my opinion. The third story of the day I wanted to talk about was this $50 mega ticket that people are talking about a lot for World War Z, and the conversation's still continuing. I was taking a taxi into work today. I saw it being talked about on ABC as well with their movie minute with Sandy Kenyon. He's a riot. I see him in a lot of press screenings. He's quite the personality, and he was talking about this. And I find it interesting that in this conversation, everyone's talking about, is this movie worth it? What is the studio giving me that make it worth for me paying $50? Is the quality of the film there? And I'm getting a little frustrated that nowhere in this conversation is the movie-going experience being discussed, because that, to me, is the weak point in movie-going right now. And I've been talking to people about this, and I said, you know what? Maybe I would pay $50 for a movie ticket, but this is what don't give me a poster and commemorative 3D glasses and a small popcorn. I want a reserved seat so I don't have to wait on a ridiculous line. I want a clean theater so I don't have to worry about what I'm sitting in or be grossed out when I go to use the ladies' room or I'm at the concession stand. And also I want to make sure that no one's going to talk during the movie so I can actually enjoy it. Because I remember one of you pointed out during Man of Steel that was totally ruined for you because someone was talking through the whole thing. I had two drunk women sitting behind me when I went to see A Good Day to Die Hard. And, that is starting to be something that would be worth the extra money to me. Seriously, it's a shame, and it's kind of, it's a shame that I have to pay extra for that. You would think that would be a given, because it is a service industry. So, and of course, you want to make sure you pay $50. The quality of the movie is there. But I think the theaters need to be, held accountable for the crappy experience they're providing in terms of movie going, and I think that needs to be factored into these more expensive tickets. So that's where I'd like to see the conversation go next. And maybe if enough of us bring it up, Hollywood will be forced to do that. But I guess it's cost cutting. I don't know. I'm hoping that theaters like Alamo Drafthouse and the ArcLight start to, kind of move things in that direction. Because as I've said before in this show, Los Angeles is an all reserved seating town, and New York is, just went the Lincoln Square IMAX just went reserved seating recently, and so I'd like to see this continue. But no talking, clean theater, reserved seat. I will pay more money for that. Okay, so also one question for today. A lot of you asked me, what do I think of the rumor that Michael B. Jordan might be the new Johnny Storm, aka the Human Torch, and what do I think of changing the race on that character? And also, conceivably, you'd have to change the race of Sue Storm as well, because that's the Invisible Woman, because she and Johnny are brother and sister. I'm actually mixed on this one. While I'm always up for giving people a new demographic and opportunity front and center, I think that this is going to open up a huge can of worms, because then you're going to have an interracial relationship with Reed Richards, and I think it's going to really detract from the story, just because that's going to just change the story so much. So I actually think that I would not change the race here on Susan Storm and Johnny Storm. I would keep them as white characters. I think they already tried that a little bit with Jessica Alba, and that didn't quite work, and so it's not even a fresh thing to do here. So all due respect to Michael B. Jordan, as I'm going to talk about later this week, he has some other cool opportunities on the horizon. I'd love to see him in a comic book movie. I just don't feel that as Johnny Storm is the choice I would go with. And I would like to say that I think I'm a little disappointed that Fantastic Four, for this reboot with Josh Trank from Chronicle, that he's thinking race instead of age. Fantastic Four is the comic book franchise that should be skewing more adult. I don't want another teeny bopper, look at us all, we've just started, we're just going out of school, Fantastic Four or comic book movie. I'm really against it. I know that when they were first thinking of making a Fantastic Four film, they played around with the idea of Steven Soderbergh directing it with George Clooney and maybe Charlize Theron as Reed and Susan, and that interests me much more. Fantastic Four is very much a family, and so that's another reason it should skew older. And I would be, I think that, it's great to see more diversity coming in Hollywood, but let's not forget that diversity means many things. It means race, but it also means gender. It also means socioeconomic classes, as I was talking about with World War Z, and it also means age, that I was also talking about with Star Wars last week, when the only female roles they're casting are teenagers. So, think a little more, I think that, to me, Fantastic Four should be like Gravity. the Alfonso Cuarón film coming out with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney. I want to see that kind of sophisticated adult storytelling in the comic book in the comic book movie world, and I think Fantastic Four is the place to do it. So that's today's morning movie news. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay tuned for Movie Math later today, and some other cool, interesting red carpet coverage later this week. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.